Welcome to CEO Interviews via Satellite, a production of AGORACOM, in which we take the time to interview small-cap public companies and their CEOs about their recent developments. With us today, I'm excited to have, for the first time ever, Chris Bunka. He's Chairman, CEO, and President of Lexaria Corp. The company trades in the U.S. on the OTCQB under the stock symbol LXRP, and for all our friends in Canada, LXX on the CSE. You can find them on the web at lexariaenergy.com or find them on AGORACOM just by punching in the stock symbol. Now, for those of you who are new to the story, Lexaria is the newest entrant in the massive and fast-growing medical marijuana industry, one of the most recession-proof industries I've ever seen. Doesn't look like it has any apparent boom or bust cycle given the North American demographics and the rapidly accelerating acceptance of medical marijuana. Now, Lexaria, over the last 3 years, has generated approximately $3.5 million in revenue from producing wells, and that's going to continue. But management is now taking that skill, that ability to execute, business and regulatory skills as well, to enter and become a trusted participant in the medical marijuana space. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, George. You know, I'm real happy to be here. Always happy to talk to your people.
So before we get into Lexaria, this is we're coming up some pretty important dates. Give me the status of the medical marijuana industry in Canada as we speak.
Well, as most people realize, the pre-existing legislation that's been around for over 10 years expires on March 31. The new legislation takes effect on April the 1st. And the gist of it is that the small, tens of thousands of small existing growers will really effectively no longer have the ability to grow their own medical marijuana. And the industry, because of the change in legislation, is really evolving now into something that used to be mom and pop with 20, 30,000 different growers will now probably be controlled by 2, 3, or maybe 400 commercial scale growers, and that's what's created all of the excitement in the industry.
So the medical marijuana industry, in effect, is growing up. It's moving upscale into more corporate hands for better security, better controls, and those kind of things. Well, what are the differences? You talk about Canada. What are the differences between the industry in Canada and the U.S.? Because the things are rapidly evolving on both sides of the border.
Well, they really are. It's happening at an incredible pace. So, you know, from a business point of view, it's about time that a change like this happened, because really you want guys in suits that are running this business. You don't want guys in dreadlocks that are running this business. And really it's all about cash flow. It's about proper, controls and procedures. It's about dealing with regulatory regimes. Actually, a lot of the things that an effectively run public company is good at doing, dealing with the securities regulators and all the other things that have to be done. Lexaria, you mentioned we've had revenue. Yeah, we've been doing, $3.5 million over the last 3 years in the oil business, and it's a big shift. And we recognize that. Our board really, looked at it for a long time before we made the plunge. But the reality is that there's a lot of capital coming into the medical marijuana business, and there's a lot of good reasons to take our expertise dealing with regulatory environments and apply that in this new industry. So in Canada, one of the things that makes Canada an exciting place to do business in this field is that the regulatory regime is federal. And the federal government has installed this legislation. The Canadian banking industry is permitted to do transactions. Credit card companies can do transactions in this industry, in this country, and it's nationwide. So that makes sense for a business. In the United States, the federal government legislation is completely at odds with the legislation that is either coming into effect or has come into effect in about half of the states at the state level. And so although the trend in America is the same as the trend in Canada, and that is towards greater acceptance, ultimately legalization even for recreational use in places like Colorado and Washington State, but also medical marijuana is already legal in over 20 states. But federally, the U.S. federal government still classifies it as a restricted drug. So there are issues at the corporate level. I'm not talking now about smaller things. I'm talking about if you want to be an international company and player in this industry, really what effect can you have, what footprint can you have across America? And there are some questions about that. So, you know, for example, do we really want to put our people at risk operating a cash business where you can't accept checks and credit cards? And you know, I don't know that I want to answer that in an affirmative way at this point. But certainly the legislation is quite different. It's individualized in the U.S. as compared to the federal legislation in Canada. And one thing is clear, I'll say this, over the last 10 to 15 years, every single year, every opinion poll that's been taken, every referendum that's taken in a vote process is showing higher and higher acceptance and actually desire for both medical marijuana and legalized adult use marijuana in the different jurisdictions across North America. So you can really see that the trend is coming, it's here, and it's only going to continue down this path, even though the specifics will be different in the different jurisdictions.
And when you've got Dr. Sanjay Gupta in the United States, one of the most respected doctors in the world, going on CNN, creating documentaries and talking about the value of medical marijuana. And what I really liked about it is how he gets rid of a lot of the myths. You know, a lot of people think medical marijuana means you smoke at home, you're home, you smoke a joint, you get high, and you make your pain go away. That's not the case at all. And he's really bringing it to the masses, to the forefront, which is just perfect timing for Lexaria.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's quite funny because if you would have asked me a year ago what this industry is about, I probably would have given you an answer just like you said. And I really didn't understand it. But, you know, I've looked into it a lot. I've spoken with so many people. And in fact, it's quite different. There is the THC ingredient, which of course is the ingredient that makes people euphoric and high. But that's not what medical marijuana is about. It's about the other side of the ingredients that are in that plant that have all sorts of potential effects. Some of them are being well studied, others have not been well studied. But certainly there is a huge demand for non-opiate-based pain relief in both countries, both in Canada and the United States, and it's real. And I'll even share this. I had an accident half a dozen years ago, and I was placed on heavy-duty opiates, morphine and codeine and what have you. And I had a terrible reaction to it. My doctors didn't give me the option of going on medical marijuana. I didn't know it existed. And so my choice at that time was to either stay on the opiate-based painkillers and endure the side effects, which for me were very unpleasant, or to leave those that class of painkillers and go to things like analgesics, like Tylenol, which is what I did. And I have to tell you, with the condition that I was in, the pain was, you know, was pretty severe. I wish that I had had that choice. And I think that as I've gotten older and I've realized that, you know, life isn't as simple as we think it is when we're 20 or 30 years old. And the reality is there is a real need for compassionate care for people who have cancer, all sorts of people who have seizure-related diseases, or people who are dealing with chronic pain. So it's real. There are real non-euphoric, non-hallucinogenic needs and uses for marijuana.
So let's talk about your specific plan now. You obviously have a management team that's capable of doing some pretty great things. You've already shown that unequivocally on the oil generating side of things. What is the plan for Lexaria in the next 12 months, and then what's your outlook for this industry over the next 5 years?
Well, sure. You know, we've been a public company for about 9 years. We're not new to this. We're good at what we do. We've never had the opportunity to turn Lexaria into the bigger win that we wanted to in the oil and gas industry. We did pretty well, but we haven't been able to do the things that we would have liked to have done. And so obviously we need to change into the medical marijuana. We studied it intently, held interviews, talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people in the industry. And what we found was that there really is need for well-run businesses in the field. So our strategy is to bring a very clean balance sheet into the industry, good management protocols, procedures, and we're doing all of those things while we're raising money. We had announced a financing a couple of weeks ago. We're in the process of closing that initial financing right now, and we'll utilize our cash to do two things. So one, we are in negotiations as we speak with various facilities across Canada to talk about acquiring part of their interests and partnering with them, helping them grow and install practical, responsible controls and procedures. We want to standardize those controls and procedures for all the operations that we're involved in countrywide. Similar accounting systems, similar labeling systems, similar reporting systems nationwide. Number two, in addition to acquiring existing facilities or ownership in those facilities, we are looking right now at building our own. And that doesn't necessarily mean building a building, because that's just a construction project. There's lots of buildings around Canada. But it could mean moving into, exactly, it could mean moving into existing warehouse space, retasking existing space that's low cost into the medical marijuana field in jurisdictions where it's welcome, where our labor costs and our electricity costs are manageable, because many people don't realize when you get past the, pardon the buzz of the industry, when you get past that, it's just a business. And so whether you're selling medical marijuana or selling a construction project or oil or whatever it is, you still need to be a low-cost producer. So in this industry, because Health Canada mandates that a legal medical marijuana facility must be indoors, that means that you must have artificial light. Artificial light, of course, is run by electricity, and that costs money. So you don't want to be in a location where your electricity costs are high, and you also do not want to be in a location where your labor costs are high, because those two inputs are your two highest cost of goods. And so we're looking at jurisdiction where labor and power costs are as low as possible. We're trying to minimize our capital expenditures by not building gold-plated, fancy, multi-million-dollar buildings that effectively are housing an industrial operation. We want to move into low-cost areas. So that's the two-pronged strategy: partner with existing and grow our own buildings and businesses from scratch.
Well, I got to tell you, that sounds exciting. This is going to be the first of many interviews that we're going to do online here via satellite, Chris. So I really appreciate the fact that you took the time out to speak to everybody about the company's current operations and future plans. Before we go, I want to ask you one last question. You know, I've been online. A lot of people are reading what I read on the AGORACOM blog, on our social channels like Facebook and Twitter. I really believe that we are seeing .com right now, which is playing on .com. But I really believe that, because I don't see, this is an unstoppable trend. This isn't a fad. This isn't something that may or may not be here a couple of years ago. There's a huge demand for it already. Growing demand is inevitable, and now it's moving into the public markets, which is going to give a lot of people an opportunity to participate. Where do you see this industry? And I'm not talking about stock prices or anything like that, but
no.
Do you concur with that? Where do you see this industry 5-10 years down the road, the way you and I both saw the internet, the .com phase go from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, where we are today?
That's a really, really good question. And I think what it is, I think there's some things that are exactly similar and parallel, and some things that are importantly distinct about this industry. So in .com, you had 400 or 500 companies that were fighting over the space, say in North America, and nobody really knew how the internet was going to shake out. We didn't really know what that meant. Really, the big killer app back then was email. And everybody was fighting over telephony, over fiber optics, over all sorts of things. Look what happened to Nortel. It had a huge flame, and then it burned out. So .com was big and broad and undefined. .com, your word, is interesting because there are probably less than 40 public companies across North America in the sector, so it's a lot more concentrated. We know what it is. Medical marijuana has been around for decades. It's mandated by government. Doctors know how to prescribe it. So the underlying fundamental need or demand for the product is there, definable, not going to go away. You mentioned at the top of the show the demographics of North America. People are getting older, and as they get older, they get sicker. They need medications more. So it's more narrowly focused. There's certainly a lot of capital coming into the industry, which is good and bad at the same time. It drives prices higher, not just of stock prices, but also of asset prices, and that's a problem for us. But certainly the underlying demand, I think, is the main distinction. It's there and it's real, and people are going to spend money on this however they can get it, and they've demonstrated that in years gone by buying it illegally. Now they can buy it legally.
Yeah, I guess one big distinction is internet is always optional in the different things you want, but if you've got a medical condition, you're gonna spend your money on it, and you're gonna get to the medical marijuana if you can.
Absolutely, it's a hard underlying demand that's not going to go away, and I think that makes it quite a bit superior to .com.
Chris, thanks again for joining us. Looking forward to having you on future episodes throughout the year.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here and do it anytime.
You've been watching Chris Bunka. He's Chairman, President, CEO of Lexaria Corp. Trades in the U.S. on the stock symbol LXRP. For our friends in Canada, on the stock symbol LXX. For more information about the company, get to the website, lexariaenergy.com, or get to AGORACOM. We're going to watch a lot of videos like this in the future and collaborate with other investors and hear what they have to say. Just punch in their stock symbol or their name. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.